Rahman. I am the coordinator of the ECE Transformative Innovation Network. And we have just launching our first standalone events today. It's a very particular specific moments, emotional moments for us that have been struggling over the last couple of months. We are very happy to see so many signed up for the events and for having this distinguished panel and setting up this discussion. A couple of things before anything else, since we already noticed that there are those who are, could you please turn off your microphones to get this whole thing going? Then there are some practicalities. I think we are all programmed of those after 2 years of the pandemic. But in event, first of all, this will be recorded for anyone so that you're all aware of it. The second thing is that given the hybrid character of this, where many people are online, could you use your, if you want to make comments or questions, use the raise the hand function that is up on the right-hand side of the screen. And then you will be called up by Emanuela sitting next to me. She will keep track of everyone and sort of order, etc. And also to make sure extra, you can also write in the chat function. Emanuela's eagle eyes will be following you. And also for those who have reflections that concerns the how to continue, that sort of pop up in your mind after session, please also write to Emanuela. She will distribute her email here for you to that. Yeah. So having said that, I think we got all the practicalities in place. Again, please mute yourself if possible. And I will, given again that this is a sort of a special moment, we also want, our director, Elisabeth Türk, she will say a few initial words. And I leave the floor to you, Elisabeth.
Many thanks, Mikkel. And it's really a great pleasure for me to open this event here today, the ETIN seminar on platforms, circular economy, and transformative innovation. And as Mikkel mentioned, I think it's a milestone for us as we have been working on that project, on that process. And it's nice for me also to see this sort of positive vibes in the room and the many sort of informal interactions we've just had. I think that's exactly what needs to happen. So warm welcome to our speakers in the room and also on the screen. A warm welcome to our audience in the room and on the screen. And I understand we have a whole class of master students with us here today. So special thanks to the youth joining. It's very important for the UN always to involve the young generation. So that's great. And many thanks also to the team, Mikkel and the team for making all of this happen. Talking about thanks, I'd also like to thank those who make it possible, namely our donors for the ETIN network under which this event is taking place. So great appreciation to the German government, BMWK, the Bundesministerium für Wirtschaft und Klimaschutz. They've been supporting us financially through a project and also by providing content, by providing guidance. And I really appreciate that close cooperation we have with our German donors. And so many thanks to colleagues. I hope that they're joining us here today. Now, what exactly are we going to do? The ETIN seminar is called Seminar on Platforms, Circular Economy and Transformative Innovation Across Industry Comparison. So that's really, it's a little bit of a mouthful in terms of a long title. But I think it makes sense. And obviously we have thought a little bit about why we are approaching it that way. And let me share a few reflections about this. And I guess my first point is really, and I think that's a key UN point, is to say the world is not on track to meet the Sustainable Development Goals, to kind of meet what we have set out to do for this 2030 agenda. And amongst that, we are depleting resources at a scale that is unprecedented, that is simply not sustainable. So here something needs to change. And circular economy is coming in as one sort of new paradigm that can help us promote that change, that can lead us to that change, that can help us that we use resources in a more nuanced, in a more sustainable manner. So that's why for us in UNECE, the circular economy is really sort of an important topic. It helps us not only to reduce waste, but it also really helps us or inspires us to close all these material and process loops. And ultimately, we should get to an economy that is regenerative in nature. So that's sort of like the bigger picture vision in terms of the circular economy. And in UNECE, we are really trying to move our different work streams in this direction. Now, that's a challenge, obviously, not easy to do. And what we will need is, on the one hand, we need innovation. We need innovation on the one hand, obviously, including small-scale innovation, but we also need transformative innovation that is so large, so sort of impactful that it changes societies, it changes how we as humans, but also as economic actors operate. And that's why I'm very happy that we can today not only look at circular economy, but look at it from the perspective of innovation and transformative innovation. And here, I'm also very proud that in today's event, we can bring together 2 work streams and 2 networks of UNECE. And that's on the one hand, the ETIN network, the UNECE Network on Transformative Innovation. That's the one co-sponsored and formed together with the help of the German government. And it's great to see so many ETIN faces and ETIN roles here. And secondly, we are bringing together also the Circular Step Network. That's also a UNECE network that really focuses on the circular economy. And the idea here very much is to step up the transition to the circular economy. So from that perspective, very happy to have the 2 networks join hands today and bring the different communities together. Now, having mentioned innovation and circular economy, obviously, at that interface, one area that is crucially important is the platform economy and the platforms. And I think today we're going to deep dive into that. And as we just discussed before, there is on the one hand, great potential of what the platform idea can bring to sort of like making resource use more sustainable, more regenerative, more circular. And there is also great potential if we just think about turning that whole platform economy from linear to circular. So if we think about this dual objective, on the one hand, using the power, using the sort of mechanisms of the platform economy, but also like nudging the platform economy towards a much more circular and less resource-intensive economic model. And I really look forward to hearing the different presentations and thoughts on this here today. So I think we have an amazing setup. Maybe to close also in the UN, when we choose work streams and topics, one thing is that we think they're important and exciting, but obviously we also need a mandate to do so. And I'm delighted that here also several mandates come together. On the one hand, UNECE's long-standing mandate on innovation, hosted in the Economic Cooperation and Trade Division, but also the 2 sort of more newer mandates where our membership, our 56 member states, ask us to mainstream circular economy into all our existing work streams where appropriate. And most recently now, to mainstream digital and green transformation. So I think what we are doing here today, discussing circular economy, innovation and platforms, again, brings these 3 mandates beautifully together. And I hope that through the discussions today, we can also, and you experts can also, provide an input into the forthcoming commission session that's going to take place in April, and it's UNECE's highest governing body. So what we are discussing here today is not only for our own inspiration, but will also feed into member states' delegations. So I think I'm gonna stop it here. Great objective, great speakers. Let me thank specifically Peter, you're sitting here next to me. I need to make sure that I get all your titles right. Peter Evans, who is the Chief Strategy Officer of McFadden Digital, and you're also co-chair MIT Platform Strategy Summit. And thank you for being here, for sharing your knowledge, your inspiration as well, and also for co-hosting today's activities. So that's really, really great for us. We are joined online by Professor Khaled Soufani. I see Professor here, and many thanks for joining us. And I've also greatly appreciated the excellent cooperation we had on the analytical side. We have produced, or you have produced for us, a paper on digital economy and digitalization and circular economy. And this is another key contribution to the commission session. So many thanks for that. And I understand we are also joined online by Mr. Andrea Radelli, who is business advisor on digital supply chains. Yes, exactly, I can see Andrea. Sustainability and strategy project management of Global Mind. And also with Andrea, we've had an excellent cooperation where we have looked particularly at the issue of supply chains and how to trace environmental and social aspects in supply chain. So it's great for me that to see that we are bringing existing partners into the room. On the one hand, the Circular Economy Center of Cambridge Judge Business School, and also Global Mind through Andrea. Last but not least, maybe to say that in the afternoon, when we look at the different business cases and perspectives, I'm delighted to see that we have experiences from European countries, and I'm delighted to see that we also have experiences from transition economy. And I saw, for example, a presentation by Serbia lined up. So to close, I would say from a UN and UN-ECE perspective, it's really important that we generate ideas between experts and economies and economic actors from the more advanced countries. And in that case, I think we have lots of speakers also from Sweden and from EU member states, but that we ultimately also make this information available and bring it to our beneficiary countries, countries with economies in transition, and that is notably economies in Central Asia, Southern Caucasus, Western Balkan, and Eastern Europe. So very happy to see that we are moving in that direction. And I think with that, I'll close here. I also see Mr. Kjell Hakan Norfelt on the screen. Many thanks, Hakan, for being with us. You are also an important link to our normative machinery. Now we have with us our chair of the team of specialists on innovation and competitiveness policies. So again, that's a good example of how expert discussions here today link to the bread and butter of UNECE, which is the normative machinery. So once again, many thanks. Back to you, Mikkel.
Thank you. Thank you for this excellent introduction and contextualization of today's topic. Let me then just give a few points to place this in the broader discussion on transformative innovation. Because just as Elizabeth pointed out, this is how to make innovation a kind of a driving force for societal transformations. This puts a little bit of new perspectives on innovation itself, which will be behind everything that we're saying today. So it might be worthwhile just taking 2 minutes to say, what are the kind of the fundamental components? We've known innovation so far very much from the generation of technology. And one issue here is obviously to get even more what we call disruptive technologies that changes society and even creates spillovers and effects beyond the very technology itself. We know pretty well how to stimulate that kind of technology development. We have gone through everything on innovation systems, competence building, etc., etc. What we not have the same kind of knowledge about is, and we now have to focus on, is how the system itself actually going to be able to absorb this. We have to prepare the system itself to be susceptible to these innovations and even stimulate even more. So that's another point. A third point is that this absolutely has to have a scale that beyond what we're used to. So speed and scale puts yet another dimension on innovation in this case. Finally, we also have to have processes for learning. Because when we are experimenting, we have to adjust very quickly. We have to be able to abort things. And finally, this is a huge challenge in terms of coordination, because we're not talking about only one innovation. It's not one breakthrough technology that's going to do this. This is many, 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 many things. So the question is, how do you link these innovations to one another? How do you create synergies? How do you create spillovers? And who's going to do it? There are various dimensions of coordination. The market can do it, the politics, the policies and the government can do it, and there are also things like norms, ethics, that kind of social institutional framework that's going to do it. So in this case, this is the pattern that we are in ETIN going to paint over the next couple of years, we hope, peeking in on one of these pieces to sort of paint the whole picture of transformative innovation. Today, we're going to home in on one of them, and that is the role of business or economic models, better said. And Elizabeth already mentioned them. There are two here that are interesting for the transitions. One is the circular economy that has this kind of sustainability directionality built in it. And then there is the platform. that has been, the many people argue, is very transformative in itself. So how can we create links that kind of feed into one another and make them support one another? That's what we're going to talk about today. So with that said, we have three speakers in the first session, and that is Peter, who's going to talk about the platforms. And then we have Khaled with his crowd there in Cambridge that's going to talk about and give us insights on the operations of the circular economy. And finally, Andrea Redaeli, that works with this in a very substantial way, textiles, etc. So this is going to paint us a broader, let's call it conceptual vision of the whole debate. And then after lunch, we're going to dig into the cross-industry comparisons that we were talking about. And so hang on in this first one, listen to the speakers, we talk about the concepts, and then after lunch, we're going to dig into the practicalities and see what it actually takes to get this thing off the ground. And hopefully this is also going to be for the future. So having said that and placed us on the map, please, Peter, you're on.
Okay. Get set up here. I have to share my screen. Yes, like that. And then here. So,
Yeah.
okay. There we go. Fantastic. So thank you so much for that introduction. And I think what's exciting about this is I do believe that this is the first, meeting that brings these two concepts together. I've been looking into this area for some time. I've been doing platform work for about 15 years now. And so I'm very familiar with the platform economy literature. And I've been following kind of at afar the circular economy literature. And here we're looking at breakthrough innovations. And one way to get a breakthrough is actually to bring two big ideas together. So I'm quite excited about the opportunity to begin to explore that and understand how do these interrelate, and then how can we think about these more systematically. There's a deep and rich literature on platforms now that help to describe and explain the rise of these business models and how influential they have become, not just locally or regionally, but globally. And then, of course, there is a rich literature on the circular economy, but both of these are actually fairly new. The platform economy, really, that literature is beginning around 2010, 2015. And the circular economy, really, actually, that literature is since 2018. So we're talking fairly new phenomenon, and now the opportunity to bring these two together. So what I'd like to do in my presentation is give some background and context and some kind of big picture numbers so that we can understand the size and scale. I love this. This is a diagram that was created by National Geographic using data from the rich research that's been done around the circular economy. And when you look at this, it looks like spaghetti, but it's making an incredibly important point, which is today, worldwide, we extract more than 100 billion tons of material every year, but only 9 billion of that, or less than 9%, is returned. So there's a huge disconnect between the amount of material we consume and the amount that is reused. And this is getting people very concerned on a couple of different dimensions. One is when we look at the population growth and the growth of the economy, if we continue on this track, it seems that it's going to put a lot of pressure, and the damage that's done through mining, et cetera, is substantial. So how do we get this so that we change the proportion of the amount of material and we get more coming back into the economy? So this is kind of big picture, a lot of work to be done to make the economies more circular. Next is the kind of fundamental dimensions of how the economy works. We as I just showed, most of the stuff that we extract is actually not reused. So we live in a linear economy where they take, make, use, and it ends up as waste. And that means you have a high proportion that are basically externalities. But over time, as regulations come in and social norms come in, you're going to get more of that being returned. And so you change the economy fundamentally, and more value is now on the back end in the waste component. So there's this diminishing of hopefully the externalities in the increase of circular models, which creates new value opportunities, right? But it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. And so you're going to move from a low circularity to moderate to high to full. And this probably won't happen in each sector at the same rate, or even by each company at the same rate. We're going to see huge variation, but I think the fundamental objective and need is how do we accelerate that? And how do we get the scale that we need to do this, not just on a local or regional level, but on a global level? Okay, so let's talk just briefly about the difference between traditional business models and platform business models. So the analogy that's often used with the traditional business model is a pipe, right? You take resources, you put them through some sort of production process, and then you distribute them to consumers. And there's tremendous amount of efficiency gains that have arisen from this kind of model. And lots of companies have made a lot of innovations through how to optimize this system. Now, what's happened with the rise of the internet and a bunch of other features that allow for kind of a new business model to emerge, and that is the platform business model, where you don't have this linear, but you actually have a unit or entity that facilitates multiple sides of a market. And so they call these double-sided markets, and in some cases you can have more sides, so they call these multi-sided markets. And so you have this independent or neutral platform that facilitates the exchange. And this has actually revolutionized a number of industries and changed fundamentally how you create value. And so now quite a number of the largest companies in the world follow a platform business model. This gives an indication of the size and scale. So if you take the top 100 platform companies by market capitalization in 2016, that was around $4.3 trillion. They grew by 2021 to exceed $15 trillion in market capitalization. But there's quite a bit of variation across the world in terms of where these companies are and their size and scale. So in the United States has been the most successful in creating companies like Amazon, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, etc. And so the market capitalization in 2021 was close to $12 trillion. So you can see huge, and Asia as well, especially in China, with the rise of Alibaba and Tencent and others. You got very, very large platforms, and now those are moving into India and Southeast Asia. So platform business models aren't isolated just to North America and Europe. Even in Africa, we see quite a number of platforms. A big standout is Europe. Europe has lagged. It's not that consumers and companies aren't using platforms. It's just that Europe, for some reason, we could talk about that, as to why Europe has been a laggard in creating globally large-scale platforms. Just to give you a sense of the scale, these are the commerce platforms. These are companies that allow for third parties to sell their wares on their platform. In 2022, third-party marketplaces did over $2 trillion in sales. And they're all over the world, and a lot of people now buy. This is this whole rise in digital purchasing, and the digital economy are really the aggregation of these large companies. And the forecast is that this is going to continue to grow. So by 2027, third-party marketplaces are expected to grow to $3.4 trillion in sales, or 60% of global commerce. E-commerce is going to happen through these platforms. So that's a growth rate of 10%. In fact, these platforms are growing faster than retail sales. So more and more people are buying through these platforms. And so just between 2022 and 2027, the expectation is they're going to see an additional $1.3 trillion in sales happening through platforms. So the platforms are very important in their global phenomena. So what do platforms do and how do they create value? One is through the phenomenal ability to aggregate both supply and demand. And this is happening because of the internet and information technologies, but the platforms are the ones that orchestrate this and organize this aggregation capability. Also discovery, for the ability to find things, right? In the past, 20 years ago, if you came to a city like Geneva, it would have been very difficult to find somebody who had a room available. Now you can do that instantaneously. So discovery, but this is accelerating in all sorts of dimensions, not only in retail and in accommodations, but in B2B and in supply chain, all sorts of really, really interesting things. So also matching, getting that match to happen, and then the underlying payment system. So this is also enabled through innovations around banking and payment systems so fundamentally, what is the value creation? One is to dramatically reduce transaction costs. And so we talked about these platforms, and their value proposition is crushing transaction costs. The other is to support positive network effects. And the third is to create these ecosystems of complements. So these are these third parties that create value. So we sometimes talk about the transition to what they call the inverted firm. So instead of the firm taking in resources and processing them internally, they open up and create value outside the traditional boundaries of the firm. So very, very interesting fundamental transformation of the firm and how the firm creates value. The other element is these powerful network effects. If you get your platform going, you reach a certain threshold or tipping point, you can create this virtuous cycle where the more participants that join, the more value is created, which attracts more participants. And so you get this virtuous cycle going. And so these platforms can really scale to phenomenal. I mean, they serve millions and millions of customers in quite, with low transaction costs. So very, very powerful. Now let's turn a little bit to circularity. It's not that there are no platforms that do nothing in the circularity world, but it's pretty small. And I think we need to pull out those examples and see what's happening here and see if we can encourage more. So there's a German platform called Zalando that's quite interesting. It's a marketplace. It's much smaller scale than Amazon, but it operates in multiple countries throughout Europe. And it has started a program to think about circularity and how to introduce circularity into its platform. So when you look at these platforms and you see they have the drop down and the filters, I mentioned aggregation, you have to be able to know where to find what you're looking for. So they have created a category of pre-owned clothing. So that's one step that's interesting and positive. But they're pretty unique in this respect. If you look at other platforms, they don't have anything like that. Sustainable packaging, that's becoming a big issue with boxes and all of that. They've created a circular fashion hub, which is an expert network to help with this. You need people and knowledge, right? And then circular design criteria. So they're setting forth, it's voluntary right now, but they're helping brands understand what the kind of criteria you need to be more circular on their platform. And this platform, and this is why platforms are so important, is instead of going to a specific company and telling them to do something, they have the ability to cascade across. So you can see here that Zalando serves more than 4,500 brands. So if they become the standard setter in a way to facilitate it, you can have a force multiplier effect, and that's where you get your scale. Okay. And this has the potential across multiple sectors, right? So you see startups now looking at food and agriculture. There's a platform called Too Good To Go. So this is food that hasn't been fully consumed through the first round of purchasing. And so now they made an app that allows people to come in and buy after hours, so to speak, right? So maybe 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon rather than 11 or 12 for lunch and things of that nature. So again, that's that matching component. And in the apparel industry, there are now a growing number of platforms focused on reusing clothing and electronics as well. We can refurbish and reuse those electronics and resell them to people who are willing to buy used electronics. So there are platforms now that do that matching. And then scrap steel is another one. There's quite a number of platforms that are collecting and selling scrap steel. So I think systematically understanding what's going on and where and celebrating these and learning from these is a great first start to understand how the platform economy can begin to facilitate and encourage. And it also is important for agenda setting. There's a theme that's very strong in Europe that platforms are bad. They are gatekeepers, right? And they want to dominate a market. And so I think that there are instances where that's the case, and that's great, but there are also instances in which platforms become powerful enablers of important public policy objectives. So I just wanted to highlight, not everywhere there should be platforms, there are. So Europe consumes about 1/5 of the world's lubricants. You know, it's a very large economy, it's a very advanced economy, and you've got a lot of machinery in factories and transportation vehicles, etc. So there's a lot, in fact, 6.8 million tons of lubricants consumed in Europe every year. So the question is how do we get that more circular so that it's not going into the environment as waste, or worse, being burned and creating CO2. Lubricants can be recycled. And so you need a system to be able to collect them, refine them, and put them back into the system to be reused. And regulations have been increasing in Europe, but it's still fairly fragmented, and there's no central platform that can coordinate across all of Europe. So this is an area that's ripe for innovation to support a whole variety of things, not only improving collection, but it also can have national security implications, because if you reuse, you don't need to import as much. So we should also think very broadly about the consequences, not just about sustainability, it's also about national security. And we can think of now with the rise of EVs, we're going to need more and more lithium and other rare earth metals. How do we get them into the circular economy, and how do we create platforms that will enable that to happen? Okay. Another thing I just want to highlight, and this is what my company spends a lot of time doing, which is helping companies understand which software platforms enable platforms. So these are companies that specialize in building platforms for companies that will become platform operators. And what's really interesting is that I showed you that Europe is lagging in the creation of large-scale platforms. However, Europe is ahead in the companies that build platforms. So companies like Miracle and Spryker are European companies, and they are actually at the forefront of offering the software that other companies use to build their platforms. However, most of these platform vendors focus on platforms that serve the linear economy, not the circular economy. And so I think the next round of innovation that could be very interesting to encourage is to have these platforms expand so that they can also enable circular economy, not just linear consumption. And I just have two more slides here. So what does this all suggest? One of them is that we don't have now a metric for measuring how much circularity happens on platforms. So one of the contributions that this event and work streams that might flow from it is to create a platform circularity score, so that we could measure and see how much of the activity that's happening on those platforms are actually circular or not. And as I showed earlier, there are not just billions, but trillions of dollars being transacted on platforms globally. So if we could encourage these platforms to do what Zalando has done and set standards for the sellers on the platforms and support more circularity, this could be extremely beneficial and a way to catalyze the circular economy faster than it might happen otherwise. So let me just walk through, this is I think my last slide, is that we've had this evolution of the platform economy. They used to call them matchmakers. This is the early days, like 2000 to 2010. You had companies like eBay and Booking.com. Then we had the rise of Uber and Airbnb. They call that the sharing economy. And there is actually some benefit, right? You're using assets more efficiently through this. And then we have the gig economy. So it's not just things, it's also people, right? And talent that can happen on the platforms. And then we had massive globalization. So LinkedIn now has over 750 million people on the platform. Spotify now serves something like 300 million. So the scale of these companies is phenomenal. I think the big question now is, what is the next phase of the platform landscape, right? And could we see now circular platforms emerging in the future? So I think that's a challenge for this industry, but it can have huge benefits given the size and scale. So my final kind of word is, let's get platform flywheels working for circularity.
Thank you so much, Peter. This is great. Fantastic. A host of questions, obviously, we're going to get around the table and over there in cyberspace. But let's put all the arguments on the table before we start the round of conversations. We will have
another presentation.
Yes, we have two more to go. So please, Khaled, how are you doing there in Cambridge? Ready to go?
Great. Well, thank you very much. Can you hear me? I just want to double check that you can hear me.
Yes, hear you fine.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. First of all, I would like to thank you for your invitation today to join you from Cambridge. I would have loved to be in Geneva, but I didn't want to reschedule my class because I have here in front of us a class of very talented master's students who are specialists in finance, and they're taking this circularity. First of all, I would like to emphasize that the circular economy, I have slides that I will show you, but being in Cambridge now and after 2 years of virtualization and dematerialization, we're trying to go back to a little bit of basics, and a little bit of basics meaning that we write things on the board. But I can assure you that I will not write things on the board because my handwriting is not very good. But what I would like to say is that, first of all, I really enjoyed what Peter was talking about. I think this was fantastic and great examples. We live in a world of disruption, and the disruption is at all levels. And when we think about disruption, we're thinking about geopolitical disruption, we're thinking about economic disruption, we're thinking about social disruption. We're thinking about technological disruption. We're thinking about environmental disruption. And in addition to that, we're thinking about regulatory disruption. So we have this world in which we're living in that is causing all decision makers in the economy actually to revisit and repurpose, as well as rethink the way we do things. The circular economy, the way we think about it, I don't want to pick up on the political disruption or the economic disruption or the social disruption, but I would like to pick up on a couple of things here. There's the environmental disruption that we have, but that can be linked to the technological disruption. Over the years, we have moved basically from a system of what we call a brick and mortar system to a click and mortar system, right? So over the years, we have moved from a system that was totally dependent on, things happening in a brick and mortar approach. But moving to a click and mortar system really meant that we need to think about the way we do business, really think about the way we conduct our economic activities, think about the way we transact. And to a large extent, when we move to that direction, which is a click and mortar system, that requires having devices, that requires having communication, and that requires that we produce data. Now, if we are thinking specifically about the circular economy is we need to think about a circular economy as an enabler. I have one of the things that we're doing right now is that we're advising the EU, or at least we have a project with the EU on the Internet of Things as an enabler for circularity. But if we enable a circular economy, what is a circular economy enabling? Well, the bigger picture of sustainability and sustainability strategies, that's what we want. So the idea is to try and avoid the depletion of our natural resources in order to maintain a balanced ecosystem. So, well, sustainability can be enabled by a whole range of different things, like, finance, regulation, innovation, technology, and so on. That will enable sustainability. But one of the key enablers to sustainability is literally the circular economy. And when we think about the circular economy can be thought of from a macro perspective, it can be thought of from a meso perspective, and it can be thought of from a micro perspective. So it is, in my opinion, but I'm being the academic here, I'm a financial economist, so I'm not a technologist, so I would like to emphasize that. So my knowledge of technology is very, very limited. But I'm interested in business models, and hence being in a business school, hence in economics and finance. Because it's very, very important that if you want to introduce a business model, regardless of whether you're a small business, a medium-sized enterprise, a large corporation, there has to be an economic and financial viability to the introduction of the business model. If there is no incentive for companies to include the financial viability and the economic viability, we have an issue. So do you mind if I share some slides? And like, if I get talking, I will keep on talking. And I would like to share some slides here so that we can put things in context. I will just open this here, if I may. And then I will share the slides if I can. Sorry. I'm just proving how, my ignorance of technology okay. Sorry, can you see the slides?
Yes.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So we need to think about circular economy as part of the bigger picture of formulating sustainability strategy. And when we think about a bigger picture of formulating sustainability strategy, we need to think about a number of things. And just to reiterate actually what Peter mentioned, and I thought it was an excellent presentation. Thank you, Peter. The idea here is that we are extracting a lot of natural resources. And based on the current trends, according to some people, it's not my study, but basically that we will be using more resources if we continue to grow in the way that we've been growing. Only a small percentage of resources are finding their way back to the system. But one of the things that I would like to emphasize here, if I may, and that is based on the research that we've been doing and looking at different cases, is that technology on its own is insufficient to resolve reliance on resources. So yes, technology is important, technology is crucial, technology is pivotal. There's no question about that, but we cannot just totally rely on technology. There is a new model and probably a traditional model. And I always like to think about my grandmother, actually, when just before Christmas, when we were little kids, she used to ask the question, said, kids, do you want a new jumper or a new, pullover, a woolen one? And say, yes, Grandma, that would be great. Just before Christmas, this is a great gift. And she'd say, well, give me your old ones. Give me your old ones. And then she would collect the old jumpers, and she would unknit them completely, unknit the jumpers, and then turn them into woolen balls again. And then what she used to do is obviously, like many probably at that time, to produce a new jumper from an already used material. And to me, this is the epitome of a circular economy. Of course, she wasn't thinking about a circular economy. She was thinking about something that was natural to do if you want to reduce cost. That was natural to do if you want to be efficient. That was natural to do if you want to basically produce a new product, but literally with the limited resources that we have. That was natural to do, which is instinctive, that could become some kind of a business model, but without thinking about these things. But when I reflected on this thing, so, what, Grandma was really into the circular economy in some shape, way, or form. So in a way, one of the things that I would like to emphasize here is that when we think about, obviously, Peter mentioned the linear economy and the moving to a circular economy. And linear economy has been based on depleting resources and increasing landfills. And that is the thing that we want to avoid. So we want technology and innovation in every aspect that will help us not deplete resources and not fill the landfill. That's a very important thing. And as I said, we need to think about things from a macro perspective, a meso perspective, and a micro perspective. Macro perspective, the macro picture, is that we think about rules, regulations, policies, economics, the social aspects, and so on and so forth. The meso perspective is when we start thinking about the industries and the sector. We start thinking about the whole value chain. We start thinking about the supply chain. We start thinking about the distribution network. We start thinking about everything relating to a sector and industry, regardless, like whether we are in the garment industry, whether we are in the e-commerce, whatever the case might be. And then the micro aspect relating to circularity is to think about the business model relating to the individual company. And that is where we have to get accustomed to new forms of vocabulary. We have to think about reusing, recycling, repurposing, repairing, remanufacturing, sharing economy, as Peter mentioned earlier. So we need to really incorporate new vocabulary into the way we're doing things. Now, the circular economy principles, really to a large extent, can be built on a whole range of different things, but designing out waste and pollution is key. Keep products and materials in use for as long as possible. And that is, in a way, a challenge to the planned obsolescence business model that we've been seeing over the, planned obsolescence. So we consume a product for 2 years, 3 years, and we throw it away. And by the way, a lot of people say, well, this was, is it designed by companies to have new versions all the time? Well, it's not only necessarily the case, because we have advancements in technology all the time. And as a result, any new innovation, any new technology will render the older model obsolete. So we need to deal with that as well. And the third aspect is basically to regenerate our natural system. Now, I mean, of course, I don't want to go into that, but I just want to draw your attention to the third paragraph here with the circular economy. We know it's a disruptive, innovative economic model, and it is a system that relates to different levels of economic policy, businesses, consumers, and so on and so forth. It is disruptive because, there is a challenge to the incumbent models that we have, which might be an issue. But the key thing that I would like to emphasize here is that third paragraph that you see in front of you, if I may. And the third paragraph is that the circular economy is about using as few resources as possible for as long as possible. Reuse as much of these components as possible, extract as much value from those resources in the most effective way possible, and then recover and regenerate as much of those material and products at the end of their useful life, when and if possible. Please note that I'm using the word possible multiple times here. Because when I say possible here, I'm just saying, well, you know what? It might work for some industries. It might not work for other industries at exactly the same time. And as Peter mentioned earlier, I mean, that, different industries will do it at different pace, at different steps, and so on and so forth. So we need to define that possibility and how we can enable the possibility to use as few resources as possible, and for as long as possible, and so on and so on. So to me, we need to make a distinction between defining a circular economy and describing a circular economy. Defining a circular economy, we limit ourselves. But if we describe a circular economy, we become a little bit more open, and that will help in our policy making in general. And that's my thought on this. So I don't want to go now. A circular economy is an economic model, is a policy model. It is an innovative model, but it is a business model. It is a business model in the fullest sense of the word. And when we think about the incorporation of circularity, incorporate circularity in so many different respects. And that is when we think about, a business model, we are thinking about how do we basically, what is the value proposition? Right? If you're a company, you need to literally come up with a value proposition, say, what is the value proposition of circular economy? And then how do you create value? How do you deliver value? And then how do you capture value? So Peter mentioned the word value a number of times in his presentation. That's fantastic, because it is about value. It is about value proposition. The value proposition will give an incentive basically to the consumers to consume. A value proposition will give the incentive to companies to produce. A value proposition hopefully will give policymakers the incentive to make good, efficient, effective policies. So once we define the value proposition and bring them together, then we would be in a good position to say, where we have something, we have a direction that we can move towards and to try and achieve. What is the best way to talk about value proposition? Well, if you want to come up with a business model, you need, in my opinion, to have two things. What value do you create to the end user, whether the end user is B2B or B2C? Or the second thing is that what kind of a problem are we solving? What is the company solving? A sharing economy, for example, Uber, for example. I mean, what kind of a problem is it solving? Well, they have a value proposition and their business model has taken off. And they have solved some kind of an issue. Airbnb, for example, sharing bicycles and so on and so forth. So the important thing when we talk about business models, we talk about value proposition. So the three-element framework is value proposition. What is it for a circular economy? Value creation. How do we create that value? How do we deliver the value? And then what is the spillover effect? Basically, as Michael mentioned earlier, literally to start thinking about, okay, what is the value capture? Now, when we think about business model, innovation and probably as Michael mentioned earlier, and I totally agree with Michael, and that is, innovation can literally be defined in so many different ways and can apply to a number of things. We can have a product innovation, we can have a service innovation, we can have a process innovation, we can have a business model innovation, we have a policy innovation. So innovation can apply to so many different things. Business model innovation, you can start up a business model from scratch, but the question is that what's the cost benefit of starting something from scratch? You can transform basically an existing business model to a circular business model, but what is the cost, benefits, risks? You can have a diversification of a business model. So in other words, maintain the status quo, but you create something that is parallel to it, like you create the traditional business model and then you create a parallel circular business model, or we have a business model basically acquisition. If you want more information about what I'm talking about here, and basically it's a paper that we've published recently in the Journal of Cleaner Production on business model in the circular economy. But literally, when we think about a circular business model, how do we define? Our view is that there are four key circular business models. A business model that relates to clothing and clothing materials and energy, which is recycled within the system. And that requires, on our understanding, an innovation relating to reuse, remanufacture, refurbish, and recycle. Then there's slowing, is another business model, and that's the use of extending the life of something that we're using. And then intensifying, and that is like the sharing economy. And then there's dematerializing. What we want to do here is that we want technology literally to enable all of these things. We need data. We need the Internet of Things. We need platforms to help us with closing the loops. We need platforms to help us with slowing the phase of product consumption. We need platforms to intensify the use of the product. And we need platforms to dematerialize. Well, there are platforms there, but we need to basically structure the linkages amongst the different platforms. So, in so many different ways, we can think about the Internet of Things as a very interesting way of thinking about things and platform. And whenever we think about the Internet of Things, we need to think about three important elements which will help policymakers. One, we need to think about devices, and that's technology. We need to think about communication. That's the existence of an industry that enables and facilitates communication. And the third thing is that we need to think about data, right? Data. In a circular economy, waste should not be wasted. In a circular economy, waste should in fact be used as an input, as a resource. And it shouldn't be wasted. If we have a lot of data, if we're not using the data, especially on material, on components, on devices, then we're wasting this data. We need to be able to look at the data and see how we're dealing with it, right? But of course, in a secure way, as Peter mentioned. When I did some work for the European Defense Agency, basically we did the roadmap, and that was a very interesting thing that we learned about a lot of things relating to circularity. So waste should not be wasted. That's very, very important. And how do we create a system where waste is not wasted, where waste can create revenue, where waste can reduce costs, where waste can create value. That becomes an innovative way of doing it. Now, I'm not going to take too much of your time, but the thing that I would like to mention here is that, let's say if I talk specifically about waste, and excuse me, one of the things that we can see is that when we talk about waste, well, what kind of waste are we talking about? Wasting resources, wasting capacity, wasting life cycle, wasting embedded value. Okay, well, we don't want to waste. So what do we want? We want to reduce waste. What's a good model to do that? Circular economy. Now, what could enable a circular economy? Business models can enable a circular economy. So when we think about a business model, thinking about our supply chain, think about recovery recycling, product life extension, sharing platforms, products as a service. This is a business model, so we can come up with the business models that will help us enable a circular economy. Technologies, innovation, well, 3D printing, big data analytics, and here we go. We've just been talking, platforms are very, very important. Life mineral sciences, trace and track or trace and return type of system, reverse logistics, modular designs, and machine-to-machine communication. And that's where platform becomes very important. You know, do I really throw my washing machine or my dishwasher if something goes wrong? Or should I have a modular design where I could repair? And then we have the capabilities as well that are all of them. So in essence, what I would like to say is that, you know, we can have a number of things that go into the model. The telecommunication industry plays a very important part, you know, and I don't want to really dwell too much on this, but this is a big subject in its own right. And they do play a big part in waste management, resource management, suppliers, and so on and so forth. Smart cities. Smart cities is something that we're very interested in. And even going beyond smart cities to go into smart villages, especially post the COVID situation. Why do we have to only think about smart city? Why can't we think about smart villages or smart towns? Especially if you have access to communication, if you have access to the internet, you can do a lot of interesting stuff. And with smart cities, we need to think about better resource use, less emissions, smart mobility, efficiency, lighting, all of these things that we think about smart cities, and all of these elements require platforms and innovation. So don't want to bore you with the 9 R's of circularity, but I think this, I will stop here. I hope I've delivered the message in the best of my ability, but that's where we are, I guess.
Thank you for listening. So much, Khaled. Again, a host of questions popping up, but like I said, let's get all the arguments on the table. So Andrea, are you there, ready to go? In that case, please, the floor is yours.
Sure, ready to go. Thank you very much. Okay, from my side, I will try. Me too, I have some slides to share if you want 100 and a bit more, but really I would like to try to be a bit more concise and especially to focus on what's the content of the textile business industry in general. Elizabeth, when announcing about me, introducing me in the session, she mentioned exactly that I was already part of the UNECE family because I was together with Maria Teresa Pisani in this very great project aiming to create a standard methodology for traceability and transparency in the industry, in the garment and leather industry. So I would like to present to you exactly what we have done in the last years and how is evolving at the moment the industry in this direction, in the circularity. So touching a bit the ground of what companies are doing. Allow me to share just one moment my screen. It takes a while. I hope you can see now the first page of the presentation.
Yes.
Okay, great. So allow me quickly to go through this presentation, and please stop me whenever you want at the point where it's maybe more interesting for you. Let me go first of all through the content of the project I have mentioned. What was done in regards of the traceability and transparency for sustainable value chains in the garment and footwear industry.
Excuse me, Andrea.
Yes.
Excuse me. Could you just please make it the full screen?
Oh, great. Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. I hope it's better now.
Yeah, great. No, it's excellent.
Okay. This is illustrating what we have done in terms of framework within this project. The project was exactly to enhance the traceability and transparency for sustainable value chains in the garment and footwear industry. Why this is very important for the circularity and in general the circular business economies? Because the first step to enable the circularity in this industry, in this area, is first of all to know from where the assets, the materials are coming, and to track them in terms of data, to have the data at each step of the value chain. Khaled has mentioned that it's important to have a value in a business venture, in a business activity, and much more important to use the data, in particular to enable then the technology to use this data in the right direction. And this was exactly what we have done here. First of all, we have created the framework by having policies, regulation, recommendation, and call to action to the industry. The second step was to create the process and the methodology to create transparency and traceability. And the third one, the most important, was, in my opinion, the most important because it's proving that the approach is the correct one, was exactly to involve the industry at the step 3 by creating a blockchain technology, a blockchain platform that enables the company to test, to experiment, to make experience on traceability and transparency before to implement the methodology and approach in their cases, in their use cases. So basically, we have experimented with them, and here you see some names. The project at the moment is still running because the approach was to test and experiment in the industry by materials. So we started with cotton, the blue area in this chart. Then we moved to test the solution and the methodology and the approach in the leather industry, the orange part. Now we are approaching the wool, and we will continue for synthetic and man-made fibers materials. So the idea is, again, to prove that a methodology, a standardized methodology can be used inside the entire industry to create traceability and transparency at each step of the value chain of the supply chain. Why that's important, and it's a premise, is a basis for the circularity. Because we have to think that within the industry, we think about the materials, the assets, as they are transformed step by step along all the steps of the value chain. So let's take as an example the cotton case here, the first one with the jeans. Typically, the activity, the operations in the industry is to start from the cultivation, from the farming, by harvesting the cotton, moving then to the ginning phase, spinning phase, and so on, until the yarns, the fibers are becoming yarns, then fabrics, and finally it's possible to have our finished garments and put the garments on the shop for the consumers. So if we are not able to track all these steps and having the exact information about what's happening and the content of the material, we miss the next step, which is the basis for the circularity, which is exactly to reuse this material. In particular, we have heard some words about circularity, to reuse, to recycle, to treat the waste, and so on. Now, one of the, let's say, buzzwords in the textile business in particular is the concept of the regenerative, because it's embracing a little bit more what is the reuse, but also to think how to generate newly value for that asset. And in particular, also the wording waste has been transformed in something that creates a little bit more value by talking exactly about this material as an asset, because it's embedding in this wording and in the facts also the fact that there is still a value that can be used. There are several examples of companies along the value chain who are exactly buying the material before that this leftover, not a waste, really a leftover of that operation in that step of the value chain is in a way that can be reused. So they buy this material, so they spend money for this material, they transform, they apply new transformation cycles to these materials, and in this way, they can create again a new business model. Let me drill down a little bit more in details about what we have done here by involving, just to give you some figures. We have involved more than 70 business partners, I mean companies and organizations, touching globally more than 21 countries. It means that these pilots developing also an ad hoc blockchain solution available on website, mobile, and so on and so on. It means that this solution was proven, but in particular was tested exactly by users, by the companies who are now using that to create their market, their business opportunity. Drilling down a little bit more into the detail of some cases, as I was trying to explain before, it's important that, first of all, we identify in each business model, and therefore the platforms are very, very important. We identify what are the steps where the asset is transformed. And within each step of this transformation, we collect information that must be also reliable information and trustable information. And for instance, in this example by blockchain, what we do is that we ask at each step the owner of the information to upload the information in this blockchain platform so that is visible to the next step of the value chain. For instance, the ginner here, step 3, is putting information about the cotton, the gene transformation, the characteristics, and so on, so that the spinner in the next phase can take this information, using this information to perform his own transformation and then moving the asset to the next step. So let's imagine now to focus on what is here, at least for this use case, was out of scope. In particular, the final consumption. It means to provide to the consumer some information that can stick directly into the product, in the asset, and to be reused when we collect again as waste, in reality, an asset with value after the life cycle of the product, in order to reuse part of this finished product, or entirely to regenerate this asset in a new way. Let me jump out of this presentation to use another slide that was exactly an example in another initiative I'm running. So the typical situation is that the business is now looking at the steps of the value chain. You see it here in this very shortlisted with these 5 steps view. What the companies are doing now, the industry is doing now, is trying exactly to recollect the material, the typical cases, shirts, jeans, and so on, to reinitiate, to renew the products in a step back into the value chain. But in order to do this loop back and to reuse the material, one of the key points is exactly to have the right information to reinitiate, to renew it, to reinsert the materials, the asset, into the value chain for a new transformation, to give them a new life. And this is now the challenge, is to have enough data. That's why another important initiative where we have a link and we are doing an activity is very, very important, is the Digital Product Passport initiative. Why? Because the aim of the Digital Product Passport, running under the umbrella of the UN initiatives, is exactly to try to identify which kind of data is important at each step of value chain in order to give enough information to use and in the future reuse, so regenerate that material. That's why in this initiative, they are trying at the moment to identify the most important data. And I link back to Khaled before, saying the IoT part. Sometimes it's quite easy to put some information in a label, but it's easy also to cut the label and then to not have any more information about the material. That's why the technology in this sense should be very helpful to embed the information about the material, about the asset directly into the asset in order that it stays for the entire life cycle of the product, of the asset, in order to be reused later. This initiative will show us some results already this year and will be very important, will transform how the data is treated along the value chain, making very clear which kind of data is important also to recycle the project, so to the product, so to regenerate the product in a new life cycle. In the industry, I saw also some very, very good examples of a company taking exactly this kind of leftover and reusing this leftover, this asset, mixing directly this leftover with new material. So you can imagine that we talk about a blend of typically 90% of reused material and 10% of virgin material. These are all very, very good examples. Why? Because was mentioned before, the need to use new resources is lowering more and more. This kind of businesses approach will run and will be successfully in the future. Just to avoid really to go very, very long on this topic, but available to touch it again then in the Q&A part, in the open part. What's very relevant, in my opinion, when talking about circularity in particular, is that the technology can play, yes, a very important role. Together with the technology, we need, in my opinion, also to think a little bit in a different way how we do the things or how we can do the things. This means that typically the innovation, new things, new processes, new ways to do the things has to go very, very close with the improvement processes. I mean, I do something here and I try to improve the way to do the things now. And if we merge these two aspects, how the technology is transforming our processes with the innovation and improvement part, at that point we can find really a solution, or better, a proposal to what's the market need, because it was mentioned before several times. We have to be very conscious of the fact that we are moved also by market needs, by customer needs, by social needs. And in order to fulfill these needs, we have to really consider this double ways approach. On one side, what the technology is pushing on the market as a solution, but on the other side, how can we do the things in a different way and the technology can support. This was also really the lesson out of the project I have now introduced, this traceability and transparency project. The most important part, based on our experience, was not really the blockchain platform as a technology, but was much more to offer a methodology, a process, a new way to do the things to the companies, to the industry, and the technology was just on top of this new approach, new methodology. Because honestly speaking, this was also mentioned, the technology after 2-4 years, it's already old, there is a new one. So that's why it's very important, in my opinion, first of all, to fix our focus on how we do the things, what's the methodology, the regulation, how can be supported this kind of process transformation within the industry, the society. And then on top of that, to create a technical solution, technicalities that can better support in terms of efficiency, in terms of optimization, the way how we do the things. That's basically really very, very quickly the story of a 4 years project, which is this traceability and transparency project, again made in collaboration with the industry, so with the real world, with the end consumers participating also in this project, and the companies all together with the organizations.
Thank you so much, Andrea. This is actually really sort of almost building a bridge to the second session, where we're going to actually have cross-sectoral comparisons And so you're already hinting to the post-lunch session. And I thought it was really a neat trajectory. We walked through the platforms, we walked through the circular economy, and here is a practical experience. And we're going to end up talking even more about that after lunch. But let's sum up what we've heard and have some questions. We have still some 40 minutes to go. And I would invite everyone that is out there in cyberspace to actually think about what you've heard and formulate some questions, and we discuss it here more informally. In the meantime, and as I said, you shoot away questions to Emanuela here, and she will organize it for us. In the meantime, I would, for you to sort of think, I would actually like to start to ask the three of you who have been speaking and been listening, and we've been listening to it. What is it in the two models that we've heard that is really transformative? I mean, there's various ways of thinking about transformation. So what is it that is really transformative in the respective models? Is there one way or one piece that they're not really transformative, where the other can sort of hitch on? And where are the complementarities, and where are the lacunas, and where the bridges that have to be built? So would you like to take a first crack on that, Peter? What's with the platforms? Are they really transformative in all senses? And if so, where and not? And then, Khaled, maybe you could think about the same question in your end. What's really transformative about the circular economy, and where does it not really get through?
Yeah, I think when we think back, many people saw platforms as being highly disruptive, right? You looked at how the taxi industry was upended by Uber, and how accommodations were disrupted, or hotel industry was disrupted by Airbnb. And they did, right? They changed the way that people discovered and were able to connect. But when you step back and look at it more broadly, many platforms actually just reinforce the linear economy. Right? They just make the linear economy more efficient because of matching the network effects and things of that nature. And so I think we're potentially at an inflection where we need to step back and say, hey, what's the next phase of the platform economy? Is it going to just help us mine more and deliver more product to customers? And one of the areas that I've started to look into is there's been a tremendous logistics system that has now been built to support e-commerce. And it allows now for people in big cities to get basically products within hours, right? And tremendous amount of warehousing and data analytics and last mile delivery has been built to enable that. But that, again, is linear, right? It's helping people get the stuff they want more immediately. But that infrastructure also has the potential, I don't think it's being realized, to actually take back the material.
Yeah.
And you can imagine there are now more than 200 million people in the world, particularly higher income people, who are Amazon Prime members. Amazon knows what we've purchased, so they know that there's stuff out there. It would be pretty amazing if, for example, if they made a call, you just send an email, hey guys, we need more copper. You would get people to send back that material, right? So there's a potential to close the loop. So reverse logistics, I think, are going to be very interesting. And you've got companies like FedEx and DHL that have vast systems now that are serving the linear economy, but how do we get them to serve and is that just because the private sector hasn't seen the opportunity, or is it also because public policy isn't incentivizing? this to happen. And it's probably a bit of both, actually. Companies do get entrenched in the way that they do business, and sometimes it's hard for them to see opportunities that are actually there. So partly we can draw attention to this and say, hey, how come you aren't filling that truck up on the back end, not just the front end? There's also tremendous number of platforms that have been created in logistics. So they're a platform unto themselves, but they need to be connected to this whole cycle. And that is actually, you know, somebody was mentioning the Meta platform. Is there a platform that will allow you to see where this resources would be valuable and connect them? We know that platforms can do this connection, so let's get the platforms doing what they do really, really well. So some thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's great. So what you're saying is that they've been transformative in the sense of scale. I mean, we can get lots of stuff done. So in that sense, they have been transformative. They have thereby brought in what, you know, kind of the demand side and whatever the clients into. You mentioned also the inverted firm. You have innovation. It's sort of decentralized, and it's not necessarily only in the firm, but they have not really changed behavior. And we're still doing it the same way. There is no sustainability direction, if you will. The directionality is not there. Great, thanks. So, Khalid, what's your thoughts on the circular economy? What's its contribution in terms of transition, and what is it that it so far has not been able to muster?
Thank you. Well, I think again, I would look at what is transformative on a macro level, what is transformative on a meso level, and what's transformative on a micro level, just to structure our thinking in a way. On a macro level, I think what is transformative is that we will need to have some new policies. On a macro level, there will be creating incentives to encourage certain type of technology. On a macro level, probably we'll be creating jobs, we'll be creating growth, because there's a new industry that's going to be there. An old new industry, if you know what I mean. But the more innovation, more technology we have, then we will see something new that is happening. So we will be creating jobs, we'll be creating potentially growth, and so on. On a meso level, I think it's very much in line with what Peter mentioned, and that is that what is transformative is to start thinking about the value chain in more detail, start thinking about the reverse logistics. And I've written a paper basically on what is the role of the postal services in a circular economy, and specifically looked at the US postal services and how the postal services can actually play a very important role in actually circularity. So in that respect, on a meso level, we have probably the creation of new industries in their own right. Excuse me. On a micro level, what is transformative is business models. What's transformative would be cost reduction. What is transformative would be value creation and value, basically value proposition. What is not working is, I think, we all think that a circular economy is about recycling, and it shouldn't be that. I think it's more than recycling. We all think about the circular economy as something that can be done if someone else does it. And unfortunately, we have to really emphasize to everyone that the circular economy will only work in systems. A company cannot be circular if the value chain is not circular. A company cannot be circular if the supply chain is not circular. That is where the challenges are. Another important challenge is that we need to build awareness. Probably there is a lack of awareness on what does a circular economy do, how does it do it, and what are the benefits of it. So we need to build awareness, consumers as well as producers, by the way, as well as policymakers. You know, all the three have to understand what a circular economy is. The second thing is about information education. There is a lack of I think, there is a lack of structured education about what circularity can do at this stage. There is a lot of material out there, but we need to structure that material into an educational process. capacity building is a challenge. I mean, how do you get companies to really build capacity to introduce and apply and implement circularity? And the fourth thing is the measuring of impact measurement. How do we measure the impact of circularity? So these are the challenges. So I hope I've addressed the point.
Yeah, thank you. Just for clarification, in the first one on the macro meso levels, is that things that you would say circular economy has achieved? Because I kind of perceive that yes, there is a potential here at the macro meso levels, or is it something that is already playing out? If you see what I'm saying, just.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. The answer is that the circular economy is still a nascent concept. The circular economy is still, you know, we have little initiatives here and there. There is, you know, but it is just we're only seeing the beginning of it. We haven't seen it yet, yes. And that's why we don't know, quite frankly.
No, and that goes back to also the Peter's point there, where sort of we're at low circularity going up. The sort of it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to develop over time, and I think that's a valid point. Very good, thank you.
Sorry, but can I just also before I I would like to also introduce my colleague here, Dr. Sam Welsh, who will be here. And Sam and I, you know, we do joint research on a number of things. And one of the papers that we wrote for the UNECE was Sam's work as well. I just want to, the reason I'm saying that is that at some point I have to leave for my next lecture, but Sam and the class will be here.
Now we're hoping for him to participate after lunch, so that would be great. Thank you also for chipping in this argument on you know, awareness and education and capacity building. This is something we have been discussing in-house here before the seminar. So let's get that on the table. It's a very valid point. Finally, Andrea, what are your reflections on where things stand? What can these? What is it that is transformative in each of these models, and how do they complement one another?
Yeah, thank you for asking. What I see is, again, first of all, the value. I mean, I'm really drilling down to the behavior of the industry, of the market, and so on. I've mentioned before that typically a leftover for a company is a value. Therefore, there is definitely the need to use this value, this asset again. Therefore, the possible ways how to transform these materials, how to recirculate into the economy these materials. This is one point. The second one, and in my opinion is the most important in order to enable this transformation, this different approach, is really the culture. Again, already mentioned by Khaled. It's true. What I see is that in particular in the new generation is happening that, let's take the example of the role of the creative in the fashion industry. A very good example is that now the schools, the university, they are embedding the sustainability aspects, so the circularity aspects and so on, in their practices, in the lessons, in the courses. So we will have quite soon, and that's great in my opinion. So I say something like 5-10 years, people who will be starting to generate new ideas, new products, having already embedded in the way how to do the things in the product itself, this new concept of sustainability. And this will be the great, in my opinion, game changer for the future. On one side, yes, it's important that there is a regulation supporting, that policymakers are supporting by giving the rules of the game. But it's also important that there is a natural behavior pushing of the people within the society to transform the way how we see, for instance, the finished product. a completely 100% virgin material is the same than a 90-10, where 90 is the reused, regenerated material in terms of functionality, in terms of how fashion is the product, how it looks like, how can be used, and so on and so on and so on. And this, let's say, change in the mind, in the approach, how we see the products can only starting when you create, you generate a new product starting from the idea. That's why now the companies are really investing in this generation phase of the products. How can be, first of all, to reuse in its parts, the product, but much more important, how can be combined by blending of different materials, partially coming from new, but the most coming from already existing parts and assets. That's where I see at the moment really the two key things, key aspects enabling this transformation within the industry. On one side, the culture and then the way how we do the things. On the other one, again, is how to create, to recreate a value from an existing asset.
Thank you so much. You are really kind of closing from what I started, I think, in the sense that what you're saying is essentially that it's not only about producing the technologies, it's about changing behaviors. It's about making the system prepared to absorb what's coming out of technologies. And that's an interplay where also other aspects, it's not only the policies and market, but it's also mindsets and so forth that will do the governance, let's put it that way. Now, thank you for your contributions. I think we have lots of questions here, and I leave this with you, Manuela. You have control.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Kjell has raised his hand. Kjell, please go ahead.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
Do you hear me? Yourself also, Kjell? Could you please present yourself so we all have, so we know who's talking and who's online? So just
do you hear me?
Yes, we hear and see you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kjell Håkan Närfelt. I work at Vinnova, but I'm also engaged in UN-ECE. I'm the chairman of the tech team of specialists on innovation and competitiveness policies. And great to see that ETIN is now going on forward here in live. And thanks for a great seminar. I have more of a reflection rather than perhaps a question, which the speakers might elaborate on. When we see, I define disruptive innovation as innovations that really change markets and society. It's game changing. In my view, it's always driven by, as Khaled presented, by business models, but it's also by changing the ecosystem, not only supply chain, it's really changing ecosystem. So it's ecosystem innovation also, not only business model innovation. Now, if we go to transformative innovation, we are now talking about system innovation, and that's not part innovation. We are usually looking at innovation in products, processes, and business, but now we talk about in transformative innovation about system innovation. And I would say that Agenda 2030 implies disruptive system innovation. Now that requires ecosystem innovations on societal levels. Now, how can platforms and other tools really play into changing ecosystems? And in ecosystems, behavior are important, relations are important, the way we do things, the way we are organized. An ecosystem is not only, it's a lot of non-contractual relationships that are created by ecosystem changes. And platforms seems to be very interesting in evolving into really innovating ecosystems. So can you elaborate on how we can by these new kind of business models with platforms really address disruptive system innovation, ecosystem innovation in the future? Thanks.
Thank you, Kjell. Would any one of the speakers like to respond? Peter, maybe?
Wow, that's it's a really big topic, and in fact, sometimes there's confusion and debate between what a platform is and what an ecosystem is, right? I guess ecosystems are broader, and you've mentioned that they go beyond just business. They can include universities, they can include government organizations, and so that broader kind of grouping, and then the non-contractual relationships between them. So how do they exchange and what do they exchange? And maybe information, it may be talent and things of that nature. So thinking of that. And I do believe that increasingly firms are beginning to realize that they need to compete on an ecosystem basis, not just, in a sector basis. So now there's this effort for firms to think broadly about what is their ecosystem and how do they attract players to their business. And that gets back to this idea of the inverted firm. So I guess I would say, yes, ecosystems are important. And then what are the primary drivers? It partly is supply and demand and how the ecosystem nurtures that in new ways to drive the kind of breakthroughs that you're talking about. And I think there's new pressures that are coming to bear that are going to cause ecosystem advantage, right? In assembling the right ecosystem to compete in the future. And I think one of the things that I've gotten interested in recently is, why does a company sell its product? If there's value in circularity, maybe you should never sell it. You should lease it, for example, like let others use it, but never actually give up control. So for example, Michelin, the tire company, now offers a leasing arrangement for tires, which is kind of interesting. So they will let that customer use it, but then they take it back. So I think some breakthrough innovation may be thinking about the future of leasing or product as a service in the future. We can imagine lithium, for example, is a very valuable commodity for electric vehicles. The producer of that, why do they sell it onto the market? If you're in a linear economy, sure, you want to sell it because you don't want responsibility for it any longer. But if there's value in recycling it, suddenly, oh, maybe I shouldn't sell it. Maybe I just lease it. So I think maybe some breakthroughs will happen in terms of control over a resource because you can capture the full value of that resource over its life cycle. And that allows for or creates the demand for thinking about how that company is positioned. I'll just conclude with thinking about Chile, for example. Chile produces 1/4 of the world's lithium right now. Why do the mining companies just sell it? Could they in the future say, no, I'm not going to sell my lithium. I actually want to maintain control. But that would mean that they would need to build recycling facilities near to where the production is, and then find out how to collect that from the vehicles, which means they need a platform strategy. So could you in the future see Chilean mining companies become platforms in the future? They're not there yet, but it could be a breakthrough for those companies.
Thank you very much, Peter. Khaled, would you also like to respond or comment on this question?
Yes. I think collaboration and partnership is very, very important for the ecosystem. Companies need to collaborate with each other, and they need to have partnership in innovation. So if I'm a supplier, I need to understand what's the operation, what's the manufacturing of the company, and then the distribution network and so on. So that's a very important aspect, collaboration and partnership. I am of the opinion that probably just like we have, industrial and business parks, we should have circular economy parks where companies in the circular economy supply chain should be in that same park. So they understand what they need, what they want. And we are working right now on something along these lines as ideas here in Cambridge on how do we do that. And that's my 2 cents on that. I can talk about this for ages, but I'll leave it at this.
Thank you very much. Andrea, please, any comments and feedback on this?
Quickly, let me take this example here. Before I have mentioned the blockchain project. Do you know what was the hardest part to run that project with the companies? Was exactly to put all the partners along the value chain at the same table. and to let them understand what's the content of the project, to understand which kind of information to exchange in order to have a successful transparency and traceability at the end of the value chain for the single product. So the game changer is the partnership. I mean, to see that a product is not just what I do in my step of the value chain, but how the product, the asset can be transformed along a value chain, and having again the right data at each step, how these can be regenerated or reused. That's, in my opinion, the concept, or at least how I see the concept you have mentioned in the word ecosystem, is to have the most important players around the same table, thinking in terms of value chain, how to transform the product, the asset during the life cycle of the asset. Taking the example of from the automotive, I mean, in my opinion, there we have seen a big change in the last 10, 15 years by having platforms offering not anymore the car itself, but all the services, the insurance, the parts, the typical yearly check for the car, and so on, which means to create an ecosystem of services, assets, and partners, companies who are supporting, let's say, the main seller, the brand in that case, to offer that value to their consumers.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Kjell,
Thank you. Can I make a just comment? I think it's really interesting, as Peter was mentioning, to see the platform or technologies, digital technologies, if we talk about digital economy, to move beyond the consumption production, you know, around the product or a clothing or something, to really into this, as you mentioned, into the production sphere, into the other aspects of the ecosystem, and see how digital economy can really change the way we structure our ecosystems and our behavior around certain aspects in society, which are driven then by technologies and innovation. So I think moving into this kind of production things, logistic things, into the platform digital economy will create new ways to structure our ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kjell. We can move on to the next question by Marta. Marta, please go ahead and unmute yourself, turn on your camera, and maybe introduce yourself before asking your question. Thank you.
Hi, hello, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So Marta Gresh, I'm a consultant in digital transformation. I'm also visiting professor at ECE, where I'm providing courses around digital transformation and strategy, and I'm also part of the network. So I know some of you from this association as well. So my question basically was in regards to what Professor Stefani has said around the circular economy being a question mainly around the business modeling, right? Because the discussion that we have here today, which is extremely interesting, is showing that like we all agreed, let's say, on the main line, saying that we need to make more effort. However, from the strict, like, as per today, there's still like a really big mismatch between the actual costs of, let's say, recycled resources, which is raising, and in comparison to raw resources, which is lowering down due to the changes into industrial processing. So what we can actually see today with the digital economy coming in is that the actual models and platformization, which is allowing and enforcing this circular economy, is working, especially, once again, I'm referring to the European market, on P2P, so from particular to particular, like example that I have given here, which is Vinted, but we don't see that when it comes to the actual producers, right? Because they still are struggling on finding like this way of compensating the additional cost of reused resources versus the raw materials. So that's why I was just wondering whether Mr. Stefani or maybe somebody else would be willing to reply on deal with that, because except for obviously institutional or national regulations imposing a higher taxes or whatever, there might not necessarily be a solution here. So I was just wondering what the position would be around this topic.
Thank you very much, Marta. Maybe Khaled, you would like to take a first crack at this question.
I really didn't understand the question correctly. So could you kindly make it briefer and just to the point?
Yes, of course. Yeah, sorry. So basically, you can see that the taking the example of plastic, right? The plastic, raw material of plastic now is lowering down, but at the same time, the reused plastic cost is raising. So if we're talking about business model of this circular economy, is that we have a problem here, right? Because the willingness to pay of the customers who are, let's say, environmentally responsible is obviously something that we can leverage, but there is still let's say, a very strong mismatch between the raw materials and the reused ones.
Thank you. Okay, so the question, as I understand it, is what really happens to the quality of the second use, third use, and in terms of cost, and that probably if we have a plastic that we're using for the second time or third time, and the cost. Well, that's why I did mention that if it is possible, right? Do you remember when I mentioned in my little talk? In some cases, yes. I think the cost does go up, and the question that we need to think about is that, is it only about reducing financial costs? And if it is about reducing financial costs, maybe the the circular economy model might not be economically viable for some companies. It is about the bigger cost to the natural capital that we have, right? It is about the bigger cost relating to the air we're breathing, the water we're drinking, the soil we use to grow our food. If we just think about the business cost, it will become a very narrow measure. In some areas, yes, companies can reduce the business cost. In other areas, especially with plastic, we do have a problem. And it is up to us to be as innovative as possible to try and see, well, what can we use that plastic for in the second round and the third round and so on and so forth.
Thank you, Khaled. Andrea, would you like to comment as well?
Yep, quickly about that. I mean, it's a matter of, it's true what you say, Marta. I mean, what's the financial economics behind? It's for sure something driving the decision. But here again, let me say, from an internal process, I mean, a production process point of view, manufacturing and so on, transformation and so on, if you have enough information, you can really, enough information, I mean, about your product, the material and so on, you can solve and fix the topic quite easily. That's why, again, it's very important to have full traceability and transparency on the products, to have enough information to make the decision, in particular also for the small companies, for the small mid companies who do not have the resources to drive this kind of innovation and change and transformation by the R&D part in their activities, because they do not have enough, let's say, budget to do that and so on. That's why on one side is again the data, the information and so on. On the other side is how to change the process to transform the materials. That's the way how I see it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Peter, would you like to add anything to that?
So we're talking about, I think it really depends on the industry. So we have to look at industry by industry. So the automobile industry in Europe, my understanding, currently reprocesses about 40% of the material. So that's an industry that's making a lot of progress. You look at other industries, it's very, very small. So I think cross-industry analysis would be very valuable. And then to understand the specific barriers that are associated with those.
Thank you very much. Yes, Göran, you would also like to comment.
I can chip in here because I think this is really interesting. But if we lift it one level and we look at the overall industrial ecosystem, I was attending the RISE in Sweden. They launched something called the Center for Industrial and Urban Symbiosis. And I think that is a nice word. It attaches to the ecosystem concept.
And potentially, of course, we should see all our waste as potential instead byproducts, right? How we create that circularity by launching byproducts and thinking of it as byproducts. And one idea that emerged there is, and it attaches very well to your platform concept, Peter, we need some kind of matchmaking in that ecosystem so that one company's waste becomes another one's starting material. And you need to show what, this is what I need, this is actually what is generated, and show that it's like somebody called it a Tinder for the ecosystem or a Tinder for the industries. So my question, I guess, Peter, to you is, I love that idea, the concept of creating that flywheel effect, mobilizing actions. So where's the business model here? How can we make that, so attractive that somebody runs with it and creates that kind of matchmaking?
Sorry, can I say that I'm leaving now? I do apologize, but it's been a great event and learned a lot. The class is still here. Dr. Welch is here. I have another lecture to attend to. Thank you. We'll see you.
Thank you. Thank you for your
much.
contribution. Talk soon.
Yeah, so flywheel is, I guess, slang for network effects. And it's this concept that the more participants that join, the more value is created, which attracts more participants. And so you get this, we do have to recognize that there are also negative network effects. So for example, congestion can be one. If you get too many people, then the system slows down. And that happens sometimes when IT systems get overloaded because too many people join at one time. So that's one example. Advertising can be a negative network effect. So platforms need to focus on how you promote positive network effects and limit negative network effects. And I think that would be true in the case of circularity as well. So you can imagine that once you start, for example, collection, and let's take the case of scrap steel, right? Small number of parties participate, you create, some value, but that can create more value because you create more demand, right? There's a stream, which creates an opportunity for suppliers to join. So there's where you get the circularity component, which can help drive down costs, which can attract more demand, et cetera, like that. So the question is like you said, where can these be created? And is there, is it public policy issues, not enough drivers from a regular standpoint, or is it some other reason? Like, for example, in apparel, for a long time, it was like, oh, I don't want to wear used clothing. So it was a social phenomenon. But now it's it's changing. It's actually using thrifty clothes is becoming cool. So there's a bunch of different variables and forces that cause people to behave in certain ways. There was recently an acquisition of a secondhand platform in the United States called Poshmark by a South Korean company called Naver. And the idea there is that this platform existed. They're seeing more demand in Asia for secondhand clothing. So they've decided to do the acquisition to globalize it. So I think that's exciting, whereas companies are beginning to see the demand emerge. And so rather than try to start from the beginning, and there's a little debate happening online here about the cold start problem. Well, big incumbent companies don't have to worry about it sometimes because they've already got large customer bases. What they need is actually the platform technology. And that can happen through acquisitions, for example, to scale it faster than otherwise would happen.
I think the lid is off on transformative innovations in terms of circularity. So there's so much happening that I think the connections actually is right now what's really critical here. But thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's a good segue because you already mentioned the ongoing discussion in the chat. So I think it was the question from Sam, right? So one of the platform challenges is the cold start problem, chicken and egg. What are some good strategies for new platforms to get the flywheel going? Maybe you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, someone posted a new book by a guy from A16Z, which is Andreessen Horowitz. He's just written kind of a number of cases where they've overcome the cold start problem. So academics who have studied this problem have identified like 7 or 8 different strategies. You can do a big bang kind of strategy. You can do a piggybacking strategy. So Airbnb started actually by using Craigslist to announce the availability of rooms for rent. And then once they got to a certain scale, they decided, to move off of Craigslist and do their own. So there's a bunch of different strategies for the cold start. I think for this discussion, what's really interesting is the cold start problem the real problem for circularity? And I don't think it is actually. There's nothing unique. We all know that the cold start problem exists, but I don't think it's a particular impediment for the circularity issue.
Thank you. So we have reached the hour. I won't try to do a summary of this, obviously in the interest of time and for other reasons, obviously. Let me just say a few reflections. And the one first is that I think this conversation has shown what you started off with, actually saying that one of the great innovations here is actually to link different discourses that have been sort of moving in parallel. And I think this has been pretty obvious. I also think it's been pretty obvious that this is much more than just technology, obviously. This is about changing behavior. It is about making the system or the society prone and capable of absorbing what's coming out. And we've heard lots of, it was emphasized by Professor Khaled in the beginning. He said that this is a disruption on many levels. And we also heard from Andrea that you emphasized on many occasions this kind of behavioral change, the way it is necessary of doing things differently. And certainly platforms and even the circular economy are ways of actually, it's kind of a governance tool as well. And this is, I think, important to throw out. These are alternative governance models, and we can come back to that. I also think there was interesting to say Göran's final point here, that there's actually a lot of stuff going on. And I think that is why we are here with ETIN. We want to showcase. We want to have, and I come back to sort of closing here. What we are here for, we're here to stimulate these kind of meetings between peers. And when we say peers, we're not talking about sort of institutional and organizational definitions of who we are, what hats we're wearing, but rather saying that we're working on similar issues. So everyone is welcome. Everyone's voice is important. And having then, that's a segue for the next session here. What we're going to do after lunch is that we're going to pick up on all this, and we're going to go down to what has also been a recurrent theme here. It looks different in different sectors. It looks different on, the challenges are somewhat different. There are things there that are of general validity and also, but things that are very specific. So let's sort out a little bit about that. We're going to have a couple of representatives from different industries in the room and also in the cyberspace. And the ambition here in the next session is actually to see what's going on and how can we support and building the links that Göran was after. And I said in the beginning, that's the kind of the new governance dimension in transformative innovation, creating the links between various types of innovations and between different kinds of models. So that's a great challenge. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next session after lunch. Please come back because also that'll be heading towards what do we have to do? And what do we have to do in general to support it? And what do we have to do as ETIN? We have things in motion. We're starting, and we want to engage people in constructive discussions. So Peter has promised to moderate that part of the session because have fun. So come back, have fun with us. We're going to have some food for thought we already had. So let's boost ourselves with more energy, and we'll be back at
1:30.
1:30. There you go.
CET.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you, everybody. Yes.
Thank you very much.